Hello, my name is Marcus and this is going to be fun. Alright, we simply have this text in After Effects that's doing absolutely nothing, so let's start by animating this bad boy. So click on the little arrow here, and then animate, and then choose tracking. So we're gonna go all the way over to the last frame, and we're gonna keyframe the tracking amount, go over to the first frame, and we're just gonna decrease it. Something like this, so they squeeze together, something nice like this. And we're gonna also scale it, so go down into transform, keyframe scale, and go to the last keyframe and just scale it up a smidge, so it feels imposing over time. And now let's pre-comp this bad boy, Control-Shift-C, and let's just call it text. There we go. So now we have that base thing going. So I also used a graphic to create the galaxy within the text. I got that from Pexels, as you can see here. So I'm just gonna import that image from my folder and just pull it in here, graphics. There we go. So now let's just place this down in our timeline and look at that sexiness. I'm gonna press S for scale and scale it down, something like Dios. And now I'm gonna actually wanna alpha matte with the text. So I'm gonna click alpha matte, and now look at this. Now we're already alpha matting this bad boy. We also want the texture to actually scale over time. So I'm gonna keyframe this, go to the end, maybe decrease it in size, whoopsie daisy, so maybe, yeah, something like this, and maybe scale it up at the beginning a little bit more, so we get a little bit of a depth effect as now we want to change the color of this bad boy, even though these colors are quite rad, as young people would say. So I'm gonna add a hue and saturation effect, double click on that bad boy, and I'm just gonna hue it until we get that nice pink and purple. Yes, please, yes. So next part is we're gonna make these nice 3D beams. So go up into layer, new, solid. Let's call this beam 1. Beam me up, Scotty. Okay, and we're gonna add the beam effect. You guessed it. Double click on that bad boy. Now the cool thing about the beam effect is it could actually emulate 3D space, as you can see here. So if we actually say the length to be full, so it goes from both points all the time, you can increase the starting thickness so it actually looks like it's traveling in 3D space, which is quite cool. So I'm gonna set the first point to hit the text there, and this one just out of frame, so we get this nice 3D perspective. You can increase the size a little bit more, something like this. Let's make it almost white, so this nice pinkish white. We're gonna animate this real quick, so just a few frames in, something like this. We're gonna keyframe the time and go to the beginning and set it to 0. Whoops. There we go. So now it looks like it's coming in and hitting. So now we want this laser to almost disperse when it hits. So if we go over to when it hits, something like this, we're going to apply a roughen edges effects. And we want it to be quite graphic, so it's actually fine that it has a hard edge, so we can even crank that up, maybe increase the scale, something dramatic like this. So we want the beam to dissolve after it hits, so you can go over to the starting thickness, keyframe that bad boy, go over a few seconds and just take it all the way down to 0. So it just lasers out over time. And let's do the same with the roughen edges. So click on the border here, keyframe that bad boy, and press U to bring up all the keyframes. And go over here and just increase the border 30 or 50. So it kind of dissolves over time, something like this. Now we also want we want it to be like this organic fade out. So we're gonna go over here and apply a turbulence displacement. Double click on that bad boy. And here at the end, we wanna crank it up quite a smidge. Let's just find the sweet spot here. So increase the amount quite a lot and play around with the size. So here at the end, we're gonna keyframe the amount, and at the beginning, we're gonna set it to 0. So when it hit, it has this nice dissolve effect. So now let's start applying some easing to all these keyframes. So I'm gonna press U and U again to bring up all the keyframes. So the turbulent displace, I'm gonna press Control-Shift-K to bring up the keyframe velocity and set it to 0 and 100. So 0 in speed, 100 in influence. And you can see here in the speed graph, it goes fast in the beginning and it slows down at the end, which is quite nice. I'm gonna do the exact same thing for the roughen edges, Control-Shift-K, 0, 100. And at the starting keyframes, I'm gonna do the same, but without changing anything. So Control-Shift-K, and just leave it as it is. So if you go into the graph, you can see it spikes very high and it eases out very fast. Now we want to apply some really nice glows. So go over here and apply a glow, baby. Double click on that. And let's set it to screen first and foremost. We can bring down the threshold, maybe increase the radius a smidge. There we go. And we want it to be A and B colors. So let's choose something nice and pink here. Something really, really nice and pink. Something like this. And let's just duplicate this bad boy and increase the radius quite a smidge. And let's pick whip the previous pink and make the next pink a lot more pink. Maybe even a little bit purple. Actually, let's start converting that to purple and duplicate once again. And set this one, pick whip to the previous one and make it even more nice, deep purple. Something like this, and increase the radius. So see, now we're starting to get some laserness going on here. And the cool thing is we can even make these beams randomize every single time. So if you go up into turbulent displacement and evolution options and alt click on random seed, and if you write index, it's going to randomize the seed of this turbulence every single time you duplicate this layer. So you can actually just duplicate this layer once again, and it already looks more organic as it hits. Does something a little bit weird like this, which is quite nice. And we can set them both to screen. It's maybe not going fast enough, so we can just move all these keyframes a little bit sooner. So something like this. So it hits really fast, clink, there we go. Now let's add a little bit of an impact here. So let's go up into shape here and the mask tool, make an ellipse tool. Just go over here and hold Alt, Shift and Control down to make it symmetrical. And let's go into these settings. So we're going to eliminate the stroke. We only want the fill. We actually want to also have kind of a white color, something like this. And let's just go in here. So the downside is the anchor point is all the way over here. So let's fix that. Into the transform ellipse, we can just set the position to 0. There we go. And on the shape layer, we just move it over here. I'm going to call this impact 1. There we go. Now I want to be able to control this the shape of this path, so I'm going to right click on ellipse path and click convert to Bezier path. So now it's just like a normal mask, we can just animate it as we want. So we're going to keyframe it here. So animate the path here and go over just a few frames, something like this. I'm going to change the shape. So I'm going to press G to bring up the pen tool. I'm just going to move these things out quite a smidge, make some new points here, something like this, make a new point, make a new point, make a new point. So we get this nice weird splashy shape that just splashes out like this, quite aggressive. We like our splashes to be aggressive. I mean, come on, let's just... and you can always add more splash shapes like this, just simply do something like this. So it splashes out. Now we want it to actually scale in towards the end when it's done, but we want the actual mask to do the scaling or choke itself. You could either do simple choke, or you can go into the add here and click on offset paths and animate this bad boy. So just set a keyframe on amount and we can set this to 0. And just a few frames forward, we set it to minus something until it's gone. There we go. So we get this nice little impact as it hits, which is nice. And right now it's a little bit too much, so we're going to move these keyframes a smidge, so it's quite fast. It's just supposed to appear when it hits. And we can even just copy all the glows from the laser here. So copy and paste them on the impact, so we get this nice, there we go. We can even set this impact to screen immediately. And we want this to glow up quite a lot more. So we can do this in several different ways. We can just maybe duplicate the last glow again. And we can just set the radius to be quite high and increase the intensity quite a lot. So we really get that nice bloom effect, something like this. So now we want some nice particles to also appear when this hits. So we're going to go up into layer, new, solid. We're going to call this star particles. I'm going to choose particle systems 2. So this is perfect. This is where we hit. There we go. So we're going to choose where the producer is hitting. So go over here into producer and say yoink. And we're going to keyframe the birth rate already now. So maybe set it to 1. keyframe, go 1 frame before, set it to 0. Maybe 3 keyframes forward and set it to 0 again. So it just spawns and disappears. And we can change the longevity all the way up to 6 seconds, maybe. And let's go down into physics here. And let's say direction, because we want it to follow the same direction which the lightning is hitting. And just move this bad boy, something like this. And if you change the extra, it's going to change how much the arc is, arcing from the original position. So something like this. And I'm going to set the gravity to 0, because this is space, there is no gravity. And go over into particle here. Let's set these to white. And the depth color all the way to something purple-ish, something like this. Now the downside is that these particles, we can't change the shape or anything because they're lines. So I'm going to set it to motion polygon. See, a little bit more interesting. They can scale down over time, which is what we want. So depth size 0 and birth size 1, and then full size variation. And now we're going to play around with the resistance and the velocity. So I'm going to crank up the velocity to like 8. And then I'm going to increase the resistance until they hang in the air quite like this. So it hits and then they just go really slow after they've hit, something like this. And we can even apply the same glow from the beam once again, because that glow is just plain sexy. So paste. So see, already now we're starting to get some impact here. Nice. Now we're going to look at how we dissolve this text on. So layer, new, solid. And yes, let's just have it completely white. And let's call this bad boy matte. Or mate, or whatever you want to call it. Take it all the way down here. And we're going to create a mask just where the impact point is. So something like this. Now let's make it visible. So go down here into mask. So this is going to control everything. So as it hits, we're going to keyframe the mask expansion. So take it all the way down to 0. And then quite a few seconds forward, we're going to be keyframing this to be like half the text size. There we go. And we don't want this to be perfectly uniform. So I'm going to apply a roughen edges. Double click. And just crank up the setting and the edge sharpness and the scale. So we want this to be this nice big scale. So right now it's being cut off, probably due to some weird alpha calculation thing. So to fix this, we're just going to write CC composite. There we go. And place it right before the roughen edges. And see, now it's fixed. And now we're going to just hide this layer right now. And let's apply the matte to the text. So go down here into the actual text layer and apply a set matte. Double click on that bad boy. Make it look at the matte. You guessed it. There we go. And make sure that it looks at effects and masks. So see, now it's being painted on by that matte, which is quite bloody cool. Now I want to create this nice glowing edge when the text is being revealed. So I'm going to create a new layer, solid, and call this glow edge. And white is perfect. Let's just place it on top of the text. And let's do the exact same thing. So set matte. And we're going to make it look at the matte, effects and masks. And we're going to invert the matte so it only appears where the matte is not. And we're going to duplicate this effect and once again click on invert. And this time we're going to make it look at the text. So see, now there's already a little bit of a line. So if we now apply a simple choker, double click on that bad boy, and take it into minus until it becomes more clear, so something like this. You can duplicate it until the line becomes quite clear, so something like this. So see, already now we got some really nice sexiness going on here. And we can once again go to the beam. I'm going to just click on all these layers, Control A and press left so that they minimize. I'm going to select all these glows, Control C, and paste it on my glow edge. So we get this nice glowing edge. I mean, come on, if that's not sexy, I don't know what is. And we can even add some residue. So you can duplicate the glow edge and call this residue here at the end. And once again, select all the effects, press left, and we want to apply a echo effect. And we're going to apply that right after the chokers. So let's play around with this. So let's set this to like 0,008 and maybe 30 copies. Set it to screen, decay all the way down to 95, starting intensity maybe 0,2. Now right now it's not very apparent, and that's probably because it's going quite slow. So if we click on mate here and click U to get up the keyframes, we're going to Control-Shift-K on the last keyframe and ease it out, so 0 to 100. And same with the first one, but without doing anything, Control-Shift-K. So right now it should make a much faster motion at the beginning and create a lot more echoes. And the cool thing is, it is easy to just duplicate the laser of this thing over to the other side, right? You could just duplicate the beam and move it over. So now let's start giving it some more impact. So let's create a layer, new here, and adjustment layer, and call this cam_shake, baby. We want this to shake that screen. So as we're hitting here, there we go, perfect. We can even set the particles to also be screen, basically set everything to screen that has glow. And let's apply a transform effect to this cam shake layer. And let's apply some sliders. So slider, double click on that bad boy, and call this one times, duplicate it, and call it amount. And now let's alt-click on position of transform and write wiggle. And then just pick whip it up to times, write comma, and pick whip it up to amount. And see, well, now we're going to be able to keyframe this camera shake. So set times to maybe 12, keyframe amount to 40, go one frame before by pressing page up, set it to 0, go a few frames forward by pressing page down and set it to 0. So we get this nice impact as it hits. So to really emphasize this impact, we're going to add an exposure effect. Exposure, there we go, double click. And we're going to keyframe this at the point of impact, go one frame before, press U to bring up the keyframes, set it to 0. And a few keyframes after, set it to 0. So when it hits, we're going to just crank it up to like 10. And see, now it's going to do something weird. It's going to expose it, but without any colors. And that's because we have transparency. So basically, it's just, exposing transparency and luminance at the same time, which is looking horrible. So to fix this, you can click New, Layer Solid. And we're actually going to use this afterwards. I'm going to call this Galaxy Echo. And press OK. And you put it all the way at the bottom. And see, now it actually works. Now it's just exposing everything. There we go. So we get that really nice impact as it hits, and it's really flashing the entire screen. That's what we want. So now we're going to create that Galaxy Echo thing that I was talking about. So when it hits, we actually want it to generate like the echo of a galaxy. So I'm going to isolate this Galaxy Echo layer here. I'm going to apply a fractal noise. There we go. I'm going to press Q to use the mask tool. I'm just going to make this circle here, and you can make it whatever shape you want. I'm just going to make it round, something like this, around the point of impacts. Yes, there we go. And let's play around with this. So first of all, we're going to feather, so press F to bring up the feather of the mask. So just feather it out quite a smidge, and maybe set it to dynamic and invert, so we get these nice like galaxy-esque look things. I'm going to increase the transform quite a bit, and maybe the contrast. And you can even go down already now into the evolution options and alt-click on random seed and write index. And alt-click on evolution and maybe time times 50. It might be too much, but we can check that later. Maybe only 25. And we can have it like scale from the center. Maybe that will look cool. So I'm just going to go over here into scale, go all the way to the end, and maybe scale it up a little bit so it's a little bit more organic, something like this. Yoink. Now we're going to apply a CC toner, double click, and let's make it some nice complementary colors. So set it to Pentone, and let's play around with these blue colors here. So play around with like some cyan and some more bluish blue, something like this, and even more blue, darker blue. And at the end, we can make some quite darker blue, something like this. You can obviously play around with this until it looks good. So see, now it's actually not color mapping correctly. So if I press Ctrl-Shift-H to get rid of the GUI right now, it's taking the brightness here at the end and it's just mixing it with the transparency, which does not look very good. So we're going to apply a solid composite right after the fractal noise and set it to black. So see, now it's mapping the values more correctly. If you enable and disable, it's gonna choose the colors more correctly, something like this. So this happens as soon as it hits. So when it hits, we're just gonna activate this layer. So I'm just gonna, there we go. So before that, it's not appearing, and as it hits, it spawns. And you can just play around with the scale of this. Maybe it still looks a little bit wonky. So you can just play around with the scale. So now as a last touch, let's apply some nice glow to the text here. So duplicate the text and place it right above the Galaxy Echo here. And it's already following the mat, so that's perfect. So we can basically just copy, once again, the glows of the beam onto the text. There we go. But we still probably want it to have kind of its own thing. So we can just switch this out a bit. So first one could be quite bright. Next one could be a little bit more purple-ish. Same with the other ones. Probably better to have like a darker glow. I'm just gonna pick whip these, make them all a lot more purple. Something like this. Maybe some really dark, nice dark blue here at the end. You can play around with like the intensity of it until they reach what you want. You can make these particles a lot more sexy by using better particle systems like Particular, which I highly recommend. And you could even enhance these impacts even more by using like an RGB split effect. You can actually get a free script for the RGB split in the newsletter if you want to do that. And you can just get it in the welcome mail. If you want to receive a mail whenever there are new templates, advanced templates, tools, presets, courses, etc., then I would recommend joining the newsletter. You can find the link in the description. Now, if you like this type of logo and text animations, then I would recommend the playlist showing here on the left. So I hope you find this tutorial useful, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys can create with these techniques or ideas. Have a wonderful day with some cheese.